tonight on CBC Vancouver News. It could be a game changer for realtors.
It's going to revolutionize the practice of real estate agency.
The consequence of our lawsuit will mean more money in the pocket of home sellers.
How a U.S. lawsuit over real estate commissions could affect Canadian home buyers and sellers. Plus, strong reaction to a new security law in Hong Kong.
This is the darkest age of Hong Kong I've ever seen.
Advocates in BC are slamming it as an affront to human rights and freedom. Also, how happy are you?
I know a lot of people my age have been suffering from anxiety and depression.
Things like the pandemic, not being able to see your friends.
Our young seem to be doing worse than our elders.
If you're a young person, chances are you're not as happy as your parents. A new report reveals why.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. A lawsuit settlement in the United States is getting attention from BC real estate experts. It comes after a group representing U.S. realtors agreed to pay out millions of dollars, accused of artificially inflating real estate commissions. And they agreed to a change in practice that should mean cost savings for home sellers. And as Yasmin Varean reports, a similar lawsuit is playing out now in Canadian courts.
It's going to revolutionize the practice of real estate agency.
Vancouver real estate expert Tom Davidoff has high hopes for BC after a major U.S. settlement. The National Association of Realtors has agreed to pay $418 million and eliminate the standard 6% sales commission. The settlement still needs court approval.
The hope here is that sellers will wind up paying less in commissions when they sell their homes, which may make them more eager to sell their houses.
And he says that's also a win for buyers. So here's how it worked in the U.S. If you want to sell your home, you probably want to get an agent, and that selling agent makes a deal with the buyer's agent. It's a commission, and it's split two ways between the two agents at roughly 6%. That adds a lot of money for the seller, which can lead to increased housing prices for buyers. Now the Realtors Group in the U.S. has agreed to stop this practice, and there's hope for would-be buyers and sellers in Canada that it might end here too.
The argument is that that is not fair, doing it that way, and by doing it that way, it falsely inflates the amount that the seller will actually be required to pay in the end.
In this country, the same commission rule exists, but percentages vary. In BC, it's 7% on the first $100,000 and 3% on the balance. So now a similar battle is set to unfold here in Canada. The Canadian Real Estate Association and dozens of local brokerages are facing a class action lawsuit. It alleges a conspiracy between brokerages to boost commissions, which the CREA denies. The settlement in the U.S. could strengthen the Canadian case, says the firm behind it.
We think that the consequence of our lawsuit will mean more money in the pocket of home sellers, and it'll reduce the cost of we expect, residential real estate across the country.
None of the allegations in the lawsuit have been proven in court, and the suit is still waiting to be certified as a class proceeding. Yasmin Varean, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada stands out from many other countries when it comes to happiness. The latest data from the World Happiness Survey finds younger generations are not as satisfied with their lives compared to older generations. CBC's Yvette Brand looks at why.
This is 4-year-old Wyatt's happy place, but for many Canadians older than him, happiness seems to be declining.
So after COVID, people don't go out anymore, like as much as before, so I think that might be one of the reasons.
This year's happiness report shows this country has slipped from 13th place to 15th, and when it comes to those under 30, Canada is 58th. Far behind Nordic countries like Finland, which has been in first place for 7 years now.
So in Finland, Denmark, and the other Scandinavian countries, you'll find that wealth is way more evenly distributed. So more people benefit from the wealth that's being generated in these countries.
The rankings are based on assessments by individuals of their own lives.
Canada stands out in that our young seem to be doing worse than our elders by more than is true elsewhere.
Not a shock at this table of 20-somethings.
Finding places or like even the simple things like groceries can add up so much, and then you feel this like weight of like you have to be able to make this amount to afford to live here, otherwise you're low income when you're not even low income. There's moments where those thoughts of course come in, like things like the pandemic, not being able to see your friends.
Trying to buy my groceries and pay rent, and I can only work part-time because I'm in school so much.
Researchers hope that tracking happiness using hard science could inspire governments to adopt new approaches.
Then we can rethink a lot of things. What would life look like if we actually had well-being oriented policies for a generation or two? I think that's an unknown.
He hopes this research forces change, shifting government health and social policies to focus on more than economic growth.
Meeting friends makes us happy, having people over.
To help Canadians back to a happier place. Yvette Brend, CBC News, Vancouver.
A traffic note for those on the roads in the Lower Mainland right now. There's been an emergency closure of a southbound lane of the Massey Tunnel between Richmond and Delta. The province says a BC Hydro transmission line has an issue that's posing a safety risk. That means the far right southbound lane has been closed through at rush hour, with drivers urged to find a different route. It is expected to reopen later this evening. A provincial court judge has acquitted a Kelowna man for going on an angry tirade against a security guard during the pandemic.
Go back to your country. You're not a Canadian. You're not a Canadian.
A local reporter caught this on video in 2021. Bruce Ordzik can be seen yelling at a South Asian security guard outside a vaccine clinic. He was charged with disturbing the peace. The case was widely condemned, with then Premier John Horgan calling it vile, racist behavior. This week, a judge said that although Ordzik's actions were offensive, insulting, and obscene, they did not meet the legal definition of disturbing the peace. Ordzik is a well-known member of the Kelowna Freedom Rally movement, which held weekly protests decrying public health orders and COVID vaccines. Advocates in BC and abroad are decrying a new so-called security law in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong government says it will protect the territory, but as Liam Britton is finding out, critics say it is an affront to human rights and freedom.
Edmund Wan, better known as Giggs, spent about a year in prison in Hong Kong on charges of sedition and money laundering for his support of Hong Kong exiles. But under new rules, it could have been much longer.
I'm damn sure that I will be put in prison for at least 2 to 3 years.
He's a refugee in Canada now, living in the Lower Mainland. And like many in the exile community, he's decrying Article 23, which he says has Hong Kongers afraid to speak out.
This is the darkest age of Hong Kong I've ever seen.
The Article 23 national security law passed in Hong Kong's legislature unanimously after being unveiled less than 2 weeks ago. The territory's chief executive, John Lee, appealed for it to be passed at full speed, and starting Saturday, it will be in force, threatening harsh new penalties to quash opposition to the territory's government, including tougher punishments for breaking the so-called sedition law, which critics say is a tool used to crack down on voices for democracy. They now face up to 7 years in prison for seditious acts and words, up from 2. Failing to report treason by others could lead to 14 years in prison. Giggs says no one is sure what will define those offenses.
Only the Hong Kong government, under the Chinese Communist Party, has the only interpretation on what is treason, what is sedition, what is insurrection, or what is espionage.
The Hong Kong government says Article 23 is necessary, but Amnesty International calls it a devastating moment for human rights. Human Rights Watch terms it a full-scale assault on rights, suppressing basic freedoms. Reporters Without Borders warns journalists should fear the law, calling it an extension of rules against press freedom defenders. The government can even punish acts committed anywhere in the world, not just in Hong Kong. Even here in Vancouver, those who fled the territory may face financial sanctions. This advocate for Hong Kong democracy says with so many people in Canada striving to maintain family or professional ties to Hong Kong, the law is chilling opposition here.
We have volunteers been up and say, I'm sorry, after the Article 23, I can't help you anymore. It's so sad, right? that you can't really, in a free country, to do whatever you want.
Now, we asked via email for comment from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, their Canadian Embassy, and even the Vancouver Consulate right here. We didn't hear back. Global Affairs Canada is expressing, quote, deep concern about Article 23. Pro-democracy activists like Tung plan to protest here at the consulate and at the Vancouver Art Gallery on Saturday, the day this new law goes into effect. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And an update to that story. Just moments ago, the Chinese embassy in Canada did respond to our request for comment. In part, it says, we strongly deplore and firmly oppose individual countries and organizations slandering the Safeguarding National Security Bill of Hong Kong. An online petition to stop logging in Vancouver's Stanley Park has gathered 15,000 signatures in 1 month. The park board is undertaking a major project to remove as many as 160,000 looper moth-infested hemlock trees. It says it's targeting trees that pose the greatest risk of falling, but many are not happy with the move.
You would look up and you would see forest. Now on those same trails, you hear traffic noise, and you look up and you see the highway.
The park board says crews have so far only dealt with about 20% of the area that is set to be logged. The BC government is spending $30 million on more infrastructure for electric vehicles. The province is aiming to add 500 new public EV charging stations across BC. That's in addition to the existing 5,000 already in place province-wide. The minister in charge hopes this will alleviate concerns of drivers who might be hesitant to go electric.
We're helping to reduce range anxiety by prioritizing these new stations to fill geographic gaps that we have in the network. And we're going to have a particular focus on rural, northern, and First Nation communities.
BC already has one of the largest public EV charging networks in Canada. The province hopes to have 10,000 stations in total by 2030. After a 4-year hiatus, the Vancouver International Auto Show is back. It'll be taking over the Vancouver Convention Centre until Sunday. We stopped by on day one to check out the latest innovations in the automotive industry.
What are you most looking forward to today at the auto show?
Just trying on different cars. It's great to have everything in under one roof rather than going to different dealerships. I think that's very exciting, and then you get to try different stuff and all that things.
Just to look at the Cybertruck.
That's the only reason why you came to the car show?
I looked at some of the exotic cars too.
What kind of exotic cars are you interested in?
McLarens. I'm not interested in buying them. I just like them.
Oh, we're just browsing, just looking cars. They're awesome.
What kind of cars do you like the best?
Oh, the supercars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris. They're amazing.
But yes, we're here to see the Cybertruck. It's so cool.
Well, it is officially spring today, the first official day, and while many are celebrating the blooming flowers and the longer days, the arrival of spring has a greater significance for some Nowruz or Navroz, known as the Persian New Year. It's being celebrated by many today and tomorrow. Our Zara Premji is celebrating as well and shares more about the significance of the special time.
Devotional recitations, fire jumping, and of course stocking up on tasty treats, all part and parcel when it comes to getting ready to celebrate Persian New Year.
Because of the part of the culture. It's many years ago, our grandma, grandfather, usually grandma, they make a sweet at home by hand to share with neighbors, share with the family and all grandchildren.
Nowruz in Farsi, Navroz in Ismaili Muslim tradition, and Nowruz for the Baha'i is celebrated at the time of the vernal equinox when night and day are equal length. And where there's Navroz or Nowruz, there's bound to be a half-sin table. It carries 7 specific items whose names start with the letter sin in Persian, all set out as symbols of prosperity, health, and happiness.
When we see the sun, when we see the flowers, it's kind of natural for us to want to put our best step forward.
Celebrations, traditions, meals, and even clothes are different depending on who is taking part, but the meaning remains the same.
It's a very, very special moment for us because Nowruz, New Year's, and also the weather is going to be changed, spring start.
It's a good chance for us to reflect on our personal goals and set new intentions.
New start for the nature and also for the
people too.
For me, a day after Nowruz, I feel the weather is nicer, the blossoms, everything just look more beautiful.
And this year in particular, the new year coincides with Ramadan. A rare occurrence and a unique experience for those partaking in both.
Nowruz for me is kind of maybe like a physical, natural reset, but Ramadan is more of a spiritual reset. Fasting itself is a challenge, but it's rewarding too, and I think the reward is that much more profound with the anticipation of, I guess, the evening celebrations of Nowruz that I can participate in.
And whether you're celebrating or you want to acknowledge someone who is, it's a simple greeting that could go a long way.
این فارسی میشه سال نوتون مبارک باشه، نوروزتون پیروز باشه و آرزوی سال خوبی براتون داریم. It means we wish happiness and happy New Year's.
Happy Nowruz. In Farsi, we say Nowruz Mubarak.
Happy Nowruz to everyone, yes. Okay.
Zara Premji, CBC News, West Vancouver.
Well, it's only March, but northern BC is already putting in place a burn ban. Starting March 28th, Category 2 and 3 open burning will be prohibited. This affects Prince George, Stewart Nechako, Mackenzie and Peace regions, and Fort Nelson Forest districts. Bans typically come into effect in late April or May, but officials this year are taking early precautions because of the persistent dry conditions with little rain. The ban includes fireworks, sky lanterns, and burned barrels, but does not include small campfires. They will be in effect until October. And Darius Madavi joins us with our first look at the forecast. And Darius, it seems like we just never did stop talking about the fire danger since last summer, and things aren't looking great so far for this year either.
No, I'm afraid not. Actually, this is looking back at Monday. Our fire danger has come down since then, but I just want to emphasize how odd it is to have this level of fire danger this time of year. Even if it is only a small part of BC, those sunny conditions, those hot conditions, in combination with the drought that we're seeing, really is what set records. So record-breaking temperatures, but that's not, that couldn't have done it alone. It really is the drought situation that we came into the season with. Now, that being said, temperatures have come down. We have started to see a little bit of precipitation, very much scattered showers. I know that I woke up this morning to a few showers, but not even being picked up on the radar there. So really just some very light precipitation that we've been seeing. A little bit of snow for some of the mountains, both here on the coast and in the interior, especially along the Rockies. But the bigger rain is still yet to come. Tomorrow, we see a few scattered showers in places, but for the most part, we're looking like a mix of sun and cloud across the south coast and Vancouver Island. And then that more severe rain comes in Friday, Saturday, potentially Sunday as well. So in terms of conditions, we had the first full day of spring today. I'm sure many people were a little bit disappointed that they didn't get quite as much sunshine as they might have wanted. And tomorrow, we do see some more sun across the region, but then we do see some more rain in the days ahead. So not exactly the spring we might have been hoping for, but regardless, that's what we got.
We certainly got our fill over the past week, so we'll take this while it's here. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Tanya.
In the Okanagan, construction has begun on an upgrade to Knox Mountain's first lookout. The city of Kelowna says the changes will improve accessibility and irrigation at the hiking destination.
We're going to also be organizing the pedestrian routes to connect to the Paul's Tomb Trail to avoid the conflict between cyclists, hikers, and also vehicles. So that's how I see it. It'll just be a better organized space.
The first stage of the upgrade is slated to be finished in May. That will mean trail detours and the closure of Knox Mountain Drive. The second stage will begin in late 2024 or into 2025. The city says the whole project will cost nearly $400,000. Well, still ahead, lots changed during the COVID-19 pandemic, including the ways wildlife reacted to the decline in human interaction. Our Darius Madavi will be back with more of an explanation of how this unfolded after the break. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Russian protest band Pussy Riot is in town touring their art exhibit, Velvet Terrorism. Host of On the Coast, Gloria Makarenko, sat down with one of the band's founding members to discuss Vladimir Putin's fifth successful election in Russia, as well as the war in Ukraine and global political movements.
Well, 12 years have passed since the feminist arts collective Pussy Riot staged their punk prayer protest against the impending re-election of Vladimir Putin in a Moscow church. Now, Pussy Riot's members were charged with hooliganism motivated by religious hatred. They were sentenced to 2 years in a remote penal colony. Now, the history of Pussy Riot's imprisonment and more political actions are documented in Velvet Terrorism, Pussy Riot's Russia. It's an exhibition opening this week at the Polygon Gallery on the North Shore. And we are so happy that joining us in studio right now is Masha Aliokina, original member of Pussy Riot and one of the curators of this exhibition. Masha, hello, welcome, and it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Hi.
This is interesting timing, too, isn't it? The fact that Putin was just re-elected again this week. When I talk about your, 12-year trajectory, what's changed for you over these 12 years?
Where we live is quite dark, for my opinion, because the recent rise up of ultra-right politicians and ultra-right movements is going on, and good people need to rise up and spread the message as loud as possible. Otherwise, the world will look different in 10 years. And with my country, we witnessed it quite clear. 12 years ago, that was another country. Definitely authoritarian. Definitely the elections were falsified. But there were no hundred thousands of dead bodies in our country and in Ukraine. And nobody kind of taught us how to live during the war. We definitely heard about the Second World War. We went to history lessons, but no one could imagine that it will happen again. No one could imagine that our country will be the main aggressor in Europe. So we try to do now what we can to support Ukraine, to stand with this brave country, and to show to people around the world what is this regime about.
Well, the pandemic changed the way people worked and lived. Turns out it did the same for animals, but maybe not in the way you might think. Though there is a prevailing idea that wildlife were running free during the pandemic, a new UBC study has called that into question. To break this all down, science specialist Darius Madavi joins us now. And Darius, what's the big message, the big takeaway of the study?
In 3 words, it would be animals are complicated. Just generally speaking, we should be wary of broad generalizations, and wildlife run free when people aren't around definitely falls into that category. So a team of researchers, led by experts right here at UBC, wanted to test that claim. And so they used data on land mammals collected around the world, and unsurprisingly, their findings were not so cut and dry.
Particularly species like carnivores, like wolves or wolverines, they tended to reduce their activity in an area when humans increased, and they dropped out entirely of some of the more, some of the busiest landscapes. Whereas some other animals, like some of the prey animals, herbivores like deer and moose and elk, some of them actually increased their activity in certain places where humans became more active again.
So why the difference? Well, one idea is that in many areas, people were actually out in natural spaces more, since it was one of the few places we could go. So if more humans around caused predators to be less active, prey animals may have been more comfortable being out more. And that same root cause, humans spending more time out in nature, likely explains another of the study's findings, that rural wildlife became less active, because they're not as familiar with humans, and urban wildlife became more active. Though even those that become somewhat more active shifted when they were out, becoming more nocturnal, potentially to avoid interacting with humans there too. So it's complicated all the way down. Tanya.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, you mentioned they use data from around the world. Where exactly did that data come from?
Oh, this might be the most exciting part of the study. All this data came from a massive network of trail cams, most of which are in North America and Europe, but there are also some spread across almost every continent. And the number and diversity of people contributing to that project continues to grow all the time, which gives us a treasure trove of information.
We were monitoring the animals before this happened, and it's quite rare for us to get to do experiments when we're studying these wide-ranging animals and their interactions with people. So we kind of thought of this as a bit of a pseudo experiment in the sense that the government policies led to these strong and quick changes in what people were doing on these landscapes.
This is a huge part of what makes this paper so interesting. The gold standard of ecological research is an experimental study, but that requires separating your subjects into groups so that you can compare them. And as you might imagine, it's hard to get approval to empty out half of Vancouver to compare what animals do with and without people. So the images and video from these trail cams before versus during lockdowns is probably the closest we will ever get to actually running an experiment like that.
Interesting. What other research could these trail cameras help with?
Oh, well, these massive collaborative projects where researchers share their data are huge in ecology right now and only gaining more and more traction because they're so useful. They're popping up in other fields as well, and having that kind of wealth of information lets us explore things we couldn't have foreseen or imagined, like the impact of unprecedented lockdowns, or, as Burton explained, countless other examples.
Having these camera trap networks out kind of gives us this chance to take advantage of these unexpected things. Like we're also using them in cases like the heat dome in 2021 or some of the recent forest fires, places where we've had some of this monitoring of animal behavior or activity before something like this happens. We can learn how they're responding to all these changes that they're faced with.
So, Tanya, even if we don't know what this summer or the years ahead may bring, collaborative projects like this will help us understand and adapt to whatever change may come.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you. That's science and climate specialist Darius Madavi joining us. Up next, suspected fraud tied to subcontractors, how the federal government is trying to recover millions of dollars, and why the RCMP is involved. More on that after the break.
These chickens have something to say. But what exactly? Well, that's what Suresh Nithirajan wants to know. For the past year, he's been working with chickens trying to figure out their foul language.
Even among human beings, when we communicate, there is a lot of communication gaps. We tend to misinterpret what others say. So communication is a key for better understanding each other. What if we can understand the language of farm animals such as chickens so that we can improve their quality of life when they are here in the farm?
During a span of about 16 weeks, he put hundreds of chickens to the test, learning what their vocalizations and actions really mean.
Every day we collected a bunch of data. We stressed them with visual cues like opening an umbrella suddenly. We also played dog barking sound to stress them out via audio stress. We were trying to understand how different types of stresses play a role and how they communicate, how they express themselves.
Nithirajan says when faced with all of these trials, like the dog barking, the chickens had a lot to say. Not with words, but with things like pauses between their sounds, the pitch and tone, and the energy behind it.
Sometimes a group of chickens talk among themselves, express their satisfaction, contentment, frustration, even if there is a delay in the availability of feed, or there is a change in the hygiene protocol or the lighting intensity, they can actually express that through the vocalizations.
After collecting the sounds, their chirps, clucks, and squawks get fed into an artificial intelligence program. The AI can highlight patterns and how often certain noises are made. And that helps Nithirajan decipher when and what chickens use certain sounds for.
So we look at these modulations of sound using algorithms based on the context. Then we collaborate with animal behavior scientists, ethologists, to create a spectrum in terms of understanding the cognition. What zone in terms of, is it positive, negative, or neutral emotion?
Nithi Rajan says he hopes that by deciphering chicken language and in turn their needs, he can help farmers and others in the industry improve animal welfare.
We're also looking at extending to other species. Sometimes dairy cows are passive aggressive. They do vigorous licking to demonstrate their dislike. Especially during calving period, they need a little more space. So they try to tell in different ways, through whining, through making specific calls. So we also look at those very, very subtle, smaller cues and signs along with the vocalization to develop new ways of, hey, you know what, at least 3 to 4 hours before calving period, let the cow enjoy its own space during the birthing process. So that's the kind of strategies we would be able to develop and advise to the farmers.
Nithi Rajan.
Welcome back. The RCMP has launched an investigation after several subcontractors apparently double and even triple billed the federal government for work they did. Today, officials say it cost taxpayers $5 million in total, and it seems the problem may be widespread. The CBC's Kate McKenna has more on the political fallout in Ottawa.
Canada's Minister of Procurement defending a system that allowed subcontractors to bill multiple departments for the same work repeatedly.
Until now, there has not been any sign that this was due to mismanagement within the federal government.
Government officials say an internal review found 3 subcontractors are believed to have double billed 36 government departments between 2018 and 2022 at a cost of $5 million.
This has impacted dozens of departments. The overbilling, therefore, was made in a manner that took advantage of the fact that until recently, when everything was done on paper, until recently it was difficult for departments to coordinate and to share that information.
And there could be more cases coming. A federal government official speaking on background says today's announcement is the first wave of fraudulent billing cases the department has identified, with more expected to be announced in the coming months. This is the latest series of questions about mismanagement in the public service. Last month, the Auditor General found the final cost of the federal ArriveCan app is impossible to determine because of poor government record keeping.
The $60 million Arrive scam is just the tip of the iceberg. We now learn that there are $5 million in additional fraud that has been identified by the Department of Public Procurement.
The situation is obviously unacceptable, which is why authorities are looking into this procurement process. Anyone who took advantage of our COVID response to save Canadian lives should face consequence.
Today, the federal government announced it's looking to tighten its rules and create an office intended to stop fraud in procurement. It's also working to get that $5 million back. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has upped the ante in his party's carbon tax battle, warning the government to back off from a scheduled increase or else face a vote in the House of Commons.
If Trudeau does not declare today an end to his forthcoming tax increases on food, gas, and heat, that we will introduce a motion of non-confidence in the Prime Minister.
Such a motion, designed to topple the government and trigger an election, would be expected to fail given the NDP agreement to support the Liberals. The carbon tax is set to increase by 23% on April 1st. Well, protesters by angry commercial fishermen have forced the provincial government in Newfoundland and Labrador to postpone the delivery of its budget. The CBC's Terry Roberts has more on a clash over crabs and the rights of those who catch them.
They arrived in darkness before 6 this morning. Hundreds of angry seafood harvesters and their supporters, first easily passing through a police checkpoint, then up the steps of Confederation Building.
Everybody on this side is going to take a walk with me. Everybody on this side is going to hang out here.
From there, they peeled off in smaller groups, blocking building entrances, preventing thousands of public servants from going to work. 6:25, the first flare-up. Some protesters made a dash for a rear entrance, the same entrance used by politicians. They were met by police, including the RNC's mounted unit. For about 2 hours, a fragile calm. Even the police chief was on the front line, while some workers were upset by the interruption.
So today, when people are on open line complaining about how they didn't get through the government, that's on your shoulders. You're a selfish group of individuals. Have a nice day. Have a nice day.
"8:20. The RNC tries to open a corridor into the building for a group of workers. Some protesters strike and pull at the horses. It's not clear if any of the workers made it through the gauntlet, including some of the province's top bureaucrats. The protesters held the line, and the police eventually backed off. But not before this man, Shoe Cove fisherman Richard Martin, was injured. A broken hip, it was later reported. He was taken away by ambulance. And so was this police officer, also injured in the melee. Then another ugly incident. A senior aide to the premier was pushed back as she tried to enter the building. The fireworks comes just weeks before the opening of the annual crab harvest, the province's most important fishery. Harvesters say they've been pushed into a corner, that a small number of processing companies wield too much power, telling them when they can fish and who they can sell to. The uprising is being led by this man.
We want our business back in our own hands. Period.
Harvesters want to see more processing licenses issued. They want restrictions lifted on some plants that have a cap on how much they can buy. And they want to be able to sell their catch to companies in the Maritimes.
We're not in here joking around. We just want to get this fixed once and for all and be treated like every other industry, in Canada.
Something happened today that have never happened before in the history of Newfoundland. The budget was cancelled.
That was the CBC's Terry Roberts in St. John's. Elsewhere on the East Coast, many Nova Scotians are angry with their government for scrapping a law that would help protect the coastline. As the CBC's Kayla Hounsell shows us, the province says it has a new plan, but some coastal homeowners say they didn't get a chance to weigh in.
That would presume he was up here before and is now sliding that way.
For 45 years now, Richard Gilbert has lived right here on the water, watching the coastline change.
The erosion on the coastline is incredible.
He was thrilled 5 years ago when Nova Scotia passed legislation with the support of all political parties that would stipulate people must build a certain distance from the water's edge as sea levels rise and storms intensify. But the legislation was never proclaimed, and now the provincial government has scrapped it in favor of an action plan that tells people what they should do, not what they must.
That piece of legislation was too narrow in its focus. This action plan is a much broader plan.
But Minister, you personally voted in favor of creating a law that would dictate where people can and cannot build in 2019. Why have you changed your mind?
So much has changed in 5 years.
Back then, he says, the province didn't have all the other measures now in place to fight climate change, and he didn't have the results of a recent survey. He says the government sent 40,000 of these cards to every coastal property owner. They'd only got around 1,000 responses.
They didn't ask me, they didn't ask any of my friends or the neighbors up and down the road here.
I asked some others right on the water.
I'm wondering if you received anything in the mail from the government asking you what you think about the Coastal Protection Act.
Nothing whatsoever. No, haven't seen it.
This is really disappointing. We were in a really strong position 5 years ago to take action, and now we were very much behind.
1.2 meters of sea level rise? Wow.
The government's new strategy includes a map showing the worst-case scenario in the next 75 years.
So do you find this useful?
No.
Gilbert says the province needs a law, not a plan.
I think most of us know what needs to be done. People are saying, well, what can I get away with?
And he says the new strategy is not a reflection of what people who actually live on the coast believe is the best way to protect it.
Tide's going out now.
Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Linwood, Nova Scotia.
It is a new scam that targets a specific group of people, frustrated and fed up air travelers. It involves fraud artists that troll social media posing as airline customer service reps. The CBC's Brett Ruskin breaks down how exactly the scam works and who might get caught up in the act.
Imagine that you're trying to catch a flight and it's not going well. There are delays. Perhaps your baggage has been lost. You've tried calling your airline. You've tried going to the help desk. Nothing seems to be working. So last resort, you reach out on social media and great news. One of the airline's employees reaches out, offers help, says that you deserve compensation for your inconvenience. Their profile picture is the airline's logo. Their description says that they're a supervisor or even a manager for the airline. They only have a few followers, though, a little bit suspicious. Then they ask you for your booking reference. They ask you for a bit more details, saying that all you need to do is click on a link or download a certain app or visit a certain website, perhaps provide some banking details, and you can have your money sent to you. That is how this scam works. You might think, well, who might be able to be caught up in this type of scam? Here's one of those travelers.
I was social media aware enough to look at their profiles and realized that even though they had the Air Canada logo, they had, saying that they were supervisors, that they didn't have any followers. So that triggered some alarm bells for me. When you have flight cancellations and you have these stressful situations, individuals are just willing to, have anyone help them that they can.
And so in that specific case, the scammers told her that she should be compensated $1,500. All she needed to do to get her money was to download a money exchange app and ask for her funds in Kenyan shillings. Then they'll be transferred and become Canadian dollars. That's when she knew it was a scam and cut off communication with the scammers. Now, what do the airlines think about all of this? Keep in mind, it can affect any airline. Air Canada specifically says that they are looking at, and they have been looking for, these fake accounts, reporting them, flagging them. They take this very seriously. They say anyone should watch for that authentication check mark and to ensure that there's kind of an appropriate number of followers, not just a handful. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Halifax.
Still ahead, a love letter to the Persian nose. Ottawa's Creator Network explores the popularity of nose jobs in Iran and one woman's relationship with her own nose. That's coming up next.
Christine Filipowicz says the key to learning line dancing is knowing some basic moves and adding steps along the way. A dance instructor for 15 years, Filipowicz started teaching line dancing in Cape Breton after moving to the island a couple of years ago.
People just really love to participate in something that is fun and is to dance, and line dancing is a lot like building blocks. So you learn a little bit something new each week.
Several line dancing instructors are now holding classes in Cape Breton communities, from Cape North to Glace Bay. Filipowicz says one of her classes has grown to more than 30 students. And she says someone is heavily influencing the trend.
This ain't Texas, ain't no hold 'em. So lay your cards down, 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 down.
Beyonce just came out with a new country album a few weeks ago that is just tearing up the world, especially on TikTok.
As part of an online craze, people are recording their own dances to Texas Hold'em on TikTok. Among them is Brianna Dethridge of Sydney. She started taking Filipowicz's classes a year ago.
Over the past month, her classes, Christine's classes, have grown exponentially. There used to sometimes only be 6 of us here, and then in the past maybe 4 or 5 weeks, it's a full room. So we're super happy about that.
Dethridge is also happy to see artists like Beyonce tipping their hat to country music.
I love it. I mean, so many different artists branch out to different genres. I think it's interesting. I really like it.
The resurgence of the dance has been a long time coming for Filipowicz, who first started line dancing more than 30 years ago. She's since performed at weddings, festivals, and birthday parties.
When we moved to Cape Breton, I looked for some avenues to start doing that here. It's a great activity, but it also really helps me stay active and do something I really love.
Line dancers throughout Cape Breton say they're excited to see more people drawn to the activity because they say it's not only fun, it's a good way to spend time with friends. Erin Potty, CBC News, Sydney.
Welcome back. Further east, this year the St. Lawrence River has the lowest amount of ice ever recorded. In total, less than 10% of the river froze over. This is just the 6th time in 150 years the waterway has been deemed ice-free. In January, researchers reported that ice was slow to form on the river. That delay was worse than expected. Only the banks of the river had some ice at that time, thanks to the warm weather the month before. Our Darius Mandavi is back with the forecast. And Darius, it's not just here. It looks like it's right across the country. We've been seeing that early spring weather.
Oh, definitely. And it feels in some places that winter never really came, at least not in the force it usually does. But I actually want to talk about some place on the other side of the world where it's not, it hasn't been winter, it's been summer actually. And this is the Antarctic. So it's not just here in Canada where we've been short on ice. We actually reached the lowest sea ice extent in the Antarctic that we've ever seen. So the anomaly across the season was one of the lowest ever recorded, but we also saw some of the lowest points we've seen at all, actually. A new minimum was set for Antarctic sea ice extent. We have come up a little bit since then, but overall, just a really concerning figure. And if we actually look at the maps here, you can see how much ice we usually have in red here, and this is how much we actually got in the white. So this is a pretty concerning story here as well, something to be watching out for sure, to see if that sea ice starts to recover as we leave this El Nino event. Now, if we turn to the province, you can see still some precipitation on the way for much of the province, but mostly confined to the south. We're going to have a ridge of high pressure build in from the Gulf of Alaska, keeping the northern half of the province much warmer and more dry than the south. So still just some scattered showers and flurries coming. We're going to see some of those temperatures start to rebound into the weekend, but for now, still a little bit above seasonal for parts to the south, even as we have that cooler, unsettled air mass start to bring some of that precipitation. In terms of conditions for tomorrow, still fairly calm. Again, the sun's still coming out from many areas. Even where we do see some scattered showers, the sun should be out at some points during the day, so don't worry too much if you're seeing a little bit of rain where you are. It should come and go pretty quickly in terms of scattered showers or flurries, and then you'll see some sunshine as well. In terms of a 5-day forecast, we do still have quite a bit of precipitation on the way, but there will also be some dry periods. This is really just some overnight showers here, and then the sun should be out by the time everybody wakes up.
Look forward to that. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, Iran is famous for nose jobs, also known as rhinoplasty. Born to Iranian immigrants, Nikki Showberry explores what she says is her culture's obsession with the trend to better understand her own relationship with her nose.
When I was in my early 20s, I went on a date with this guy. Let's call him Harold. Trying to prove how perceptive he is, he goes, "I can tell your biggest insecurity." I asked him what, and he goes, "Your nose." My name's Nikki Showberry. Raised by loving Iranian parents who fled the Iranian Revolution, I grew up in England, eventually moving to Canada, where I spend my time doing projects like this. You're welcome, Canada. Going back to Harold for a second, the deeply frustrating thing is that he was right. As a young Iranian girl in rural England, I was very insecure about everything, including my nose being a different to others around me. I spent years with tragic-looking bangs in an attempt to hide my nose and had endless daydreams about how different life would be if my nose simply had a straighter bridge and slightly upturned tip. And it's not just me. Iran has one of the highest rates of nose surgery in the world. Given that the country is under a strict Islamic regime, it reportedly has the second highest number of executions globally, you might think cosmetic surgery would be a no-go, but you'd be wrong. In fact, you'd be really wrong. The surgery is so common, it's considered an Iranian rite of passage by some.
When I first arrived in Iran, I was seeing all of these women in the streets, in public places, with bandages on their noses. And in my brain, because I didn't know Iran was the rhinoplasty capital of the world, I thought, who the is beating up all these women?
I think one of the downsides of Persian culture is like it's kind of superficial. I feel like that's, I don't know, for some reason, it's been ingrained in our brains, at least for a lot of the women, that, you know, they need to have like a perfect nose and perfect cheeks and lips and everything like that.
So why does Iran seem to have a rhinoplasty love affair? Journalists, scholars, and honestly, most folks I've spoken to say that due to mandatory hijabs and strict rules on dress, one of the only ways that women can express themselves is through their face. Journalists have also suggested it could be an act of resistance against a repressive government. The Iranian government's treatment of women is well documented, and the ways in which it has stripped them of their freedoms. According to others, if you want to get ahead as a woman, whether in marriage or your career, it helps to have a more dainty, European-looking nose. And obviously, Western beauty ideals run rampant all over the world, wreaking havoc along the way. And look, I am deeply aware that I'm sitting over here in Canada, espousing lofty thoughts in my British accent, never able to truly know what it means to be an Iranian who lives in Iran. And I shouldn't even have to say this, but people can obviously do whatever they want with their bodies. If that means shaking up a few things to bring you happiness, then more power to you. The world's a tough place, and we have to find joy where we can. And in the spirit of doing whatever we want, I chose not to get nose surgery. Even though I hated my nose when I was young, I had a hunch I'd eventually be grateful for it. It also helped that, growing up, I had an aunt with a self-proclaimed big nose who told me that in the ancient Middle East, big noses were a sign of royalty, intelligence, leadership, and other wonderfully grand things. And I gotta say, even if it's from 600 BC, there's a lot of power in positive representation. And today, I love my nose. Not least because it's a carbon copy of my dad's, and I'm proud to look like him. With the privilege of freedom, I've been able to make millions of choices in life, including whether or not to have nose surgery, simply because I do or do not want to. And like so many others, I hope for a day where all Iranian women have that exact same freedom, to make decisions based purely on what they want for their lives and nothing else. And whether or not that choice involves cosmetic surgery, the most important thing is that we feel at peace with our faces, that we can feel proud of what we look like and embrace our roots, whatever that means to us.
In my teenage years, I started to not like my nose. I remember my dad at some point saying, you know, you can get a nose job if you want, which I didn't want. I didn't want to do that. Do I once in a while see, you know, some leading man with a great nose and I go, oh God, that guy's getting all the ladies. I mean, sure, that goes in your mind sometimes, but I believe that by embracing my nose, embracing the way I look, it also helped me become more confident with who I am.
You know, maybe the nose you were born with doesn't feel like it belongs on your face, and you feel like you should change something about your face so you feel more true to yourself, then that's the right thing for you. I think getting to a place where you can tune out all of the voices and opinions, and there are so many opinions in our community about yourself, and really sort of sit with your own self and figure out what's right for you, I think is the most important thing.
No matter which journey we're on, it feels good to celebrate our faces. And if you're an immigrant kid watching this, especially if you're in rural nowhere like I was, I hope you get to celebrate your face too. Oh, and screw you, Harold.
Up next, a baseball debut in South Korea, the Major League bringing a home opener to Seoul. We'll take you there after the break.
Robert Shaw handled. Set up, roll shot Tremblay. They'll go to Borowski off hands now, Nappet. Peloti, Tremblay again. Diving play by Robert Shaw, but it's set up now for Alberta. Tremblay, 23-22 for Alberta.
Tremblay is playing so well. She is receiving the load that Abby Guzin was receiving last night, and she is delivering. She is swinging so smartly off of that big UBC block.
23-22, Greywall, and we are tied at 23.
What a great side out by UBC. One ball, Akash Greywall passes it perfectly. Robert Shaw, what does she do? She hands it right back to her. She is so efficient this game for UBC.
Greywall to serve, and here comes a timeout. Wanted the timeout, Carol Dwyer doesn't get the timeout. Great play by Nappet, diving over, and Alberta gets it over through Johnston. Set up Vermette. Great play by Tremblay. Oh, it's tough. It's down the line. Oh, they're gonna give championship point to UBC on that. I thought Guzin had done the impossible.
Wow, looking at that replay, the ball was indeed out of bounds from Guzin, but it's just if there was a touch is what Alberta really wanted on that call, but did not get.
Caroline O'Dwyer looks like she wanted that timeout the point before Akash Greywall served it. She didn't get it for some reason, whether it was too late or what.
I think it was a little too late. The up ref had already called the serve for Greywall, so by the time she went to call timeout, it was too late. So they were thrown out of system there for sure by Akash Greywall's already stellar serve that we know. So if we look at this replay here from the last point, Vermette, heavy hit. Tremblay again with the dig. She's been so consistent in the back row. Abby Guzin really wanted those hands of Borowski to score the point. Borowski doing a great job staying disciplined, not drifting with her block, and that way she was not able to get a hand or touch on that ball.
And so we come back with championship points for UBC. Alberta again back on the floor within 30 seconds of the timeout. Special players are made for moments like this. And can Greywall serve her way to back-to-back championships for UBC? Great diving play off the net. They keep going. No, it's over. UBC has gone back-to-back. They are champions of the women's U Sports volleyball world. And here, Lauren, is that championship point.
A big league first for Korea. The major starting the baseball season in Seoul with a regular season game.
To an already baseball-mad country, it's a moment that puts the country on the map. The CBC's Philippe LeBlanc is in South Korea with more.
Major League Baseball fever has taken over Seoul. Tickets for this game sold out within minutes. Fans arrived early for this first ever official MLB game in South Korea.
I'm so lucky, I don't have to fly to America. Yeah, that's most important. I save a lot of money.
And here is Shohei Ohtani.
Highlight moment, mega Japanese star Shohei Ohtani, newly signed to the Dodgers for $700 million, faced Yu Darvish, a mentor to so many Japanese players.
Member of the Kiwoom Heroes who called this place home.
For Korean star Ha-Sung Kim, it's a triumphant return home.
They're going to be, I think, inspired by some of the stars that they're seeing, players that look like them.
14-year-old Ju Hoo-sung dreams of playing in the MLB.
일단 샌디에이고 파드리스의 김하성 선수.
He studies his idols' every move. This series in Seoul also showcases Korean baseball culture. It's a marriage between sport and K-pop music. Fans sing and dance nonstop during the game, regardless of the score. For Major League Baseball, these games, largely thanks to the impact of Shohei Ohtani, are a huge business opportunity in a booming Asian market.
When you consider everything, the merchandising, the TV, the sponsorships, the attraction to players, the tour groups that fly to see Major League Baseball, it's worth a lot of money.
And Ohtani, a little blooper in the left. That's going to get down.
Led by Shohei Ohtani, the Los Angeles Dodgers staged a late rally to win 5-2. In Korean baseball culture, winning isn't everything. Fans want to be entertained. And tonight, they were. For the very first time, the best players on the planet came to play in their own country. Philippe Leblanc, CBC News, Seoul.
Ohtani himself is a legend in and of his own rights over there. Japan and Korea, baseball is just so huge. So
here
exciting
too.
to see. Yeah, here too. Well, thank you for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, that's our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We will be back with your next local newscast at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Have a good night.
Good night.